Are you looking for an escape from manufactured truth wrapped in selfish agenda? Don't you just want to have a real and raw conversation, all masks and rules aside? That's what you're getting here at Titan Evolution Podcast. Get rid of all the nonsense information and discuss everything under the sun without filters. Listen to real stories of real people who will put your current perspectives to the test, guide you on living the life you truly want, and see everything free from judgment and pretenses. Time to get rid of those unhealthy environments and let your authentic self shine. Here are your hosts, Travis Johnson and Carol Carpenter.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Carol Carpenter, and that is Travis Johnson, my co-host. And we have a special guest today on the show. It's Trey Taylor. And Trey is a serial entrepreneur with several businesses, including Threadneedle, the Taylor Family Office, Taylor Insurance Services, Trinity Blue Consulting, and Ascend Partners. He is also the author of A CEO Only Does Three Things and is a keynote speaker, challenging audiences to be more intentional, find more focus, and get the right things done. He's appeared in over 60 podcasts and has been featured in Inc., Entrepreneur, and many others. He's also a certified sommelier and a private pilot. Welcome, Trey.
Thank you, Carol. So nice to be with you and good to see you again, Travis.
Yeah, we're glad to have you here. I know we've had to reschedule a few times due to crazy happenings, and we're perfectly okay with being put on the shelf when important stuff really happens. These are fun conversations, but by all means, they're not showstoppers, and this takes priority. So very happy to reschedule with you so you can handle some of that life stuff. And I just wanted to say right up front, I cannot think of anything else when I hear like serial entrepreneur or serial killer than like breakfast cereal. And you said it, and I was like, is he talking like Cheerios? Like what kind of?
He immediately goes to food?
Yes.
Is that where it goes?
Yes.
I should make my own cereal. That would be a great company, then you could really call yourself a serial entrepreneur. I really should do that. That would be a great plan. Yeah.
Actually, that would be a good, kind of a swag thing, is have them done up in little boxes with a picture of your face on it. Great.
That's true. Several years ago, I did a fake book cover and gave it to my wife for Valentine's Day, and it was called 50 Shades of Trey.
Oh, that is
I could do one of those. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm proud.
It was a short and disappointing read, unfortunately, I'm sure.
I did when I was overseas in the Middle East, there was actually some company that would print your face on socks or whatever, right?
Wait, what?
Like a photo of my face is like, I don't know, there's a big pattern with
like a pattern on the sock,
with hearts between it. So my wife she got for Valentine's Day that year socks with my face on it, which I thought was just hilarious. And so did she.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. Yeah.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
And then she hit the credit card for something she really wanted later. Right.
So one of the things that my wife does is she does Fun Sock Friday, and she has a different pair of socks. And it became a thing. So she had at one point like 400 different pairs of socks, and she like never would repeat them. And ends up
so that's her thing. That's cool.
Yeah. So it was a big deal to get socks with my face on it.
See, Carol and I thought you were being super insensitive, but you weren't. You were totally tuned into what your wife wanted. Yeah. I like it. Kudos to you.
Yes.
It's very heartfelt. I like it. Yes.
Although I can see how you guys would come to that conclusion.
Well, I thought you were going to poke fun at her. That's why I was like, oh, God, please don't poke fun at her. And then you actually said something very endearing. And so I was like, aw.
It's really good.
I do like to.
I think gift giving is a really important skill, right? To be able to give a good gift. And I want to be good at that. And I think of myself as good at that. Well, I don't give gift cards, which drive my kids up the wall. Yeah. That's all they want, right? And I don't do it, won't do it, rarely, unless I am just totally out of ideas. Do we give a gift card?
It shows that you're not connected with whoever that you're purchasing that gift for, because
I think so too.
I think if you are present and you listen to them, you will get clues as to something that they want. So I always listen. And then for their next gift, it is whatever they kind of slightly mentioned that they wanted. And they don't even think you're listening, but I think there's something very special about giving them a gift when they didn't think you heard them, to make sure they understood you did hear them and you do see them.
I agree. I agree completely. Do you guys know John Rulin and his company Giftology?
No.
No.
So the worst gifting is in corporate gifting, right? It's always terrible. It's always some like putting green for the executive office, or some stupid mug that has a trick to it, or so. It's all junk that nobody, enjoys past the first 3 seconds of opening it. And John went on this like Jerry Maguire tear and said, we're done with all of that, and we're going to be hyper focused on real gifting. You don't ever give someone something with your logo or brand on it, because that's not a gift. That's an unpaid advertisement. And you listen to what they love, and you don't send them gifts on holidays. You gift for the reason that you want somebody to enjoy what you're giving them. And the book itself is very good. He has a course now as well. And he's blown completely up, like Gary Vee does gifting through John, and like all of the MLB teams do, and all of this kind of stuff. Really fabulous. Good friend of mine. So the book is definitely worth a read. Yeah.
And it's called Giftology?
Giftology. And it's this whole like packaged thought of how should we be gifting, and what are we trying to say to people.
Have we really
He has
been so disconnected now that we can't do that anymore?
Well,
It
I
makes me
think
so
so.
sad.
I think so. And I think it's, this obsession that we have with efficiency over authenticity. And John, he just rejects it. He's like, look, you can have efficiency in many places of your life, but extending a gift from one person to another shouldn't be efficient.
Should come
By
from the heart.
definition should be personal and from the heart.
Yes.
And it should be. He has this artisan that will take this large like beer stein style mug, and I don't know if he burns. I think he carves it like wooden, carves the history of your life into this mug. Yeah. And the point is, this is something completely unique on earth. Not anybody else has your life on a coffee mug, and those are the kinds of things that he does. He did, you guys know Cameron Herold, who's his podcast is The Second in Command, and he's like the COO whisperer. He's like the guru. He just published a book a couple of weeks ago about being a COO. And he was a mentor of John's, and he mentioned to John that he loved Brooks Brothers. So John said, well, why don't you meet me at this hotel for drinks, a couple of Fridays from now? John went to Brooks Brothers and bought out a medium in everything that they had and put up in the hotel room, like merchandise in the hotel room, and then sent Cameron up to the room. And Cameron was like, oh my God, this is so nice. I grabbed a shirt. And John said, no, the entire room is for you to pay you back for what you've done for me. And it's a touching story.
That.
Yes, it is. So it was like, I don't know what the number was, but $50,000 or something,
It
and
doesn't
that's
matter.
a real
I
gift.
mean, it's the fact that there was effort and he listened. And
yes.
When people, I think there's like this basic thing for all of us is being seen and acceptance and approval, right? And
Yes.
so when somebody feels they've been seen, it's unlike any other feeling you have in the world. You just changed your life completely.
Yeah.
Carol, it's so funny that you're mentioning that, because this morning I woke up to a text from a really close friend of mine who knows I'm going through a personal situation with a death in the family right now and that sort of thing. And I'm the one sort of shouldering the responsibilities for the family for the short period of time. And my friend said, before I say anything else to you, I want you to know I see you. And that was like one of the most, I screenshotted that text, because where I am emotionally right now, that matters a whole bunch to me.
Yeah.
That somebody sees the effort that I'm
Because
putting
you're
in
drowning
and trying to,
right
I'm
now.
drowning and I'm wanting to do my best,
Yeah.
And for somebody to say, I see you trying, it just really means something. And I immediately took the mental note. I don't say that enough. I don't
Yeah.
say it to young men enough is what came to me immediately. And I'm fixing that, man. Yeah.
I think as a mentor, it's important to tell the people that you're mentoring that you see them. Really hear what they're saying, affirm what they're
Yeah.
saying, and then tell them, I see you, just so you know, and let's figure out a way for you to project into the world.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
big.
I love it.
It really is. Are you the executor of the state, Trey?
I am. Yeah. Yeah. So just for your audience, we lost the senior member, sort of the head of the clan of my family, 90 years old. My grandfather did not complete the ninth grade and built several very, very successful businesses over the years. And at the end of his days, decided that he wanted those businesses to go on into the future. And so he left them in my care for us to incorporate into the family office. Yeah.
That's
creating a legacy.
Yeah, it's quite the. It's not a burden, but it's such a high responsibility and honor, and it's just so. I watched my dad be the executor of his parents' estate at much separate times, a few years apart, and he's the youngest of seven, so he has three brothers and three sisters, and he did this 1,000 miles away from me up in Minnesota. I'm in Oklahoma City right now. And every day I ended up talking to him, and he's just so frustrated with all the bickering, and everyone's got an opinion and who's done what and why. And at the end of my grandfather's life, it was the last to die. One of his sisters was living there full time and taking care of him in house. Basically dropped their entire life to make sure to take care of him, which is amazing. She was able to do that. And it just made sense that she got to, keep the house and stay in the house. And still, regardless of how much effort was put in on that, taking care of grandfather, like there was still all these things that came up, all this bickering, all the thoughts on who gets what, when, and why. And are you going to wreck the family over a China set? Sometimes
Isn't
that's a
it
yes.
ridiculous? Yeah.
Sometimes that's the hill they're going to die on.
Right. Right. And I think even as we go through those things, we know how ridiculous they are. And it isn't about the stuff. It is about the emotional connection to stuff, or the emotional connection that wasn't satisfied by other actions of people. And this is the last leverage point, or whatever that happens to be. So for us, we've said, hey, here's the stuff, come and get it. If it's still here after this date, it's going to be sold or distributed or whatever. But if there's something that is really important to you, come and get it. Like no debates, no beef. If there's any dispute, then the family as a whole will settle that dispute. And if it can't, then I will. And I think sort of being tough up front about that so that everybody knows that their stuff is protected has been okay for us. But I sent a text this morning and said, listen, families reach a crossroads where either they stay families or they fall out over junk. We're at that crossroads. So before you make a decision, before you make a statement, before you take an action, just think through, is family more important than stuff? And whatever you decide is okay. It's not for me to preach, but that's where we are as a family today. And so we'll see how things go. I'm always stupidly optimistic, so I am optimistic that things will turn out just fine.
I'd rather be optimistic any day than pessimistic in any way.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too.
That's just
so
one of those,
that's probably more than
that's like one of
probably
those
more than anybody
that,
wanted to know.
That defines a person, right? And that's one of our staple questions here on the show: is what makes you a Titan? And one of those sounds like optimism.
I am always optimistic. I always think that, and so often you get caught out in this belief, but I always think that other people want to do the best they can do, because I want to do the best I can do. I always think that other people want that as well. Yeah.
Well, but don't you think that's projecting your values and not necessarily true? Because
maybe
as people, we want to believe others would. However, that's projecting our values onto them, and they may not hold the same values as us.
Very true. But to your point a minute ago, if I have a choice between being an optimist and a pessimist, I want to live in a world where I think that people share my values and do the same things that I do. And I'm not trying to sound like a saint there. I know that there are people that will say to me, hey, maybe you should live your values a little better. That's totally okay. I'm open to that. But yeah, if I have the choice of how I'm going to encounter the world, I'm going to encounter the world full of people that I think are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, it's
Well said.
a great way to look at it. I know there's so many times you encounter someone when they're in a season of their life, or they're at a different point in their development than you are. And I was having a pretty deep discussion in the last 10 days or so about this thing. And my buddy that I was talking to, he kind of called me out on it. He's like, "What do you mean? You know, that's not for you?" I was like, with what I'm doing in my life and where I'm headed and what I need to be doing for me, the thing that's happening in their world and how they're behaving and reacting to this thing, I'm not okay with it. I've said my piece. I'm here for them if they want to come back around, but I am not going to sit there and just, get beat on essentially because they're going through something right now. I listen to them. I take it. I don't discount a bad day, right? I listen to someone on their bad day.
Sure.
When they keep going and beating and just going down that path, I'm like, hey man, I'm here for you when you get yourself back in order. And if that doesn't happen, or if that happens, tomorrow, 5 years from now, whenever, I'm here for you. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and be talked to this way for any reason from any person.
No,
No, because that's one of your five too.
Level.
They will. So we went to a banquet last night where David Pollock, who was we're Georgia Bulldog fans. He was one of the great Georgia Bulldog players of all time, and he was addressing this big youth group, and he was telling these kids for the first time, like that you and I have heard this stuff for years, right? But these kids are 12, 13 years old. They never heard this stuff. He said, "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with," and I watched my son's face like wrestle with that as he realized, holy crap, like maybe this one kid that's always complaining that I'm hanging out with is making me more than. You could see the whole script. My son should never play poker. Like you could see the whole script go off his face, right? And being able to perform addition by subtraction and saying to that person, much love to you, but we have to part company so that we can be better for each other. That's a hard thing to do. And
I think it's really
it was
hard
really
when
interesting.
you have to let people go because you don't necessarily want to, but you also realize you're not doing them favors and you're not doing yourself favors. So it is, I remember having to let people go, and they were in my life for a long period of time. The only reason I kept them around was because they were in my life for a long period of time. I didn't know what to do with them. Right. So I kept them there.
And the pain of moving on is worse than the pain of sort of keeping it going. This happened to me when my father passed in 2005. I was very close to being engaged to someone who I didn't love enough to keep in my life the rest of my life. But it's that slow, sickening inertia of not having the character to stand up and say, there's nothing wrong with you, but I don't love you the way you deserve to be loved. And I had to have that conversation eventually when I realized that this was about to happen. 31 at that point.
Yeah, that's rough,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that was, that would have been my second mistake, right? So instead, I didn't make that mistake. Yep. And if you don't think the universe listens, man, my wife was delivered with a little Tiffany's bow on the next year. And we've been married, I couldn't tell you, I don't know, 14 years, something like that, whatever it is, 16 years. And so stupidly happy.
Was your wife number 3?
She was number 2. She was almost number 3.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't get engaged to the second one.
No. I'm laughing because I've been engaged 2 times and I married the 3rd time. So I was just trying to count, like, is that number 2? Is that number 3? We're trying to figure it out. But yeah, I hear you. It's really hard to let people go when you know they're not right.
So hard.
For you.
Yeah. And then I think you get rewarded for those character moments.
Yeah, I am now being rewarded, but my husband, who is now my ex-husband, we were married for 21 years. We had 2 children together. Wouldn't change anything in the world. But if I were to say my biggest gift is the gift I have now with my relationship with my boyfriend. So
Yeah,
I hear you.
I believe
You're
it.
up there right now, aren't you, in Canada, like at his place or a
I
hotel
am
up
in
there?
Canada. Yeah, I am. Came up here for obviously, Valentine's Day. We don't get to see each other much. I think the last time we saw each other was over a month ago. We have a long distance relationship, but not really long distance because he's in Victoria. I'm in Washington State, but
Okay.
we don't live together. And
Yeah.
it has its challenges from time to time, right? But we're both extremely busy. I run multiple businesses, he runs few businesses. So when we do get together, we try to spend as much time as we can together. And today, actually, because I'm doing podcasting, every Tuesday he spends with his father. And this came about after his mom passed away. And she passed away last year. He realized he didn't spend enough time with her. So after talking about it with me, and there was a little bit of guilt behind it, he goes, I'm not going to let this happen with my dad. So every
That's
Tuesday,
beautiful.
yep, he spends time with his dad, and they have a boat that they're working at refurbishing together so
Cool.
that they can enjoy. Pretty cool.
So I lost my dad at 52. He was 52. He had COVID, which they didn't know what it was called back then. There was a complication of the SARS-2 virus, is what's on his death certificate.
Oh, wow.
We had no idea. He got on the vent, all this stuff that we're super familiar with now because of the last 18 months. We went through in total isolation, and he was only 52 years old. He was successful in his business that we inherited and still own today, and all of that sort of thing. But at 52, it's like we woke up and he was gone, and we had to sort of deal with that aftermath. Contrasted to my grandfather, who was 90 and had a prolonged exit, 3 solid weeks, and the difference between those two scenarios. But my entire life, I've heard people say, "Oh, Dad was 84 and I lost him, and I don't know what to do, and I wish I could have one more day." And my thought, this is not creditable to me, but my thought the whole time was, "What were you doing with the time that you had?" Like
Amen.
I didn't have that with my dad, who was 52, and I don't make that mistake anymore. Like, people know in life, I hate you or I love you. They know, and I don't go to sleep at night before people know that. I really make that a focus because I have now lived it so pronounced.
So Trey, my mother passed away when she was 47. I was 19. And it was, if you ever lose somebody when you're that young and you're going into adulthood, it changes the way you are as a person.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because you sit there and you go, she's 40 something years old and she's gone. And so when do we get our ticket punched?
Yeah.
We never know.
Yeah.
So how do you choose to live your life is up to you at that point, because every day is a freaking gift.
Yeah.
So if you can treat it like that, I think people have missed that, is every day is a gift.
Yeah.
Live it accordingly.
Yeah. Have something that you're going to accomplish that day. Right. Yeah, I agree. And that can be personal. It can be business and achievement. I think sometimes we artificially say, oh, it's, because it's personal, it's by definition better than business. I don't believe that personally. Some days I really want to get after it. And some days I don't want to get after it at all. I want to have some hugs and kisses. I think it's what you can put yourself into that day that's the most important.
Yeah. Yeah. We kind of went down a morbid route.
Well, it's an important conversation. I've been taking this improv class, and we realized that there's only like 2 sessions left. We went there last night, and it's been amazing to see like the transformation for a lot of the people that have been in the class. And not this week, but the last week, we were walking out, and I was talking to the instructor. Dark alley. I was walking around to her car. And she's like, you're really doing a good job. I was like, come on, you're just, putting me on. She's like, no, she's like, you can tell that like you're in it. Like you're there, you're in it. When you actually can be fully, the whole rest of the world melts away and you're actually there.
That's a gift. Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's like, not a lot of people get that, especially like not this early in the thing. And I had been thinking about this concept for a while over the past couple of months. It's really, I haven't decided, or I haven't been told whether it's like actually being present or just being dissociated from everything else. And I don't know if there's a difference. I don't know exactly what the fine line is, but being able to be there and nothing else in the world other than that scene or that thing that you're doing at that moment, like nothing else exists in my world. And I've been able to grab a hold of that and deliver, a couple of laughs, couple of like, oh my goodness, and like you say wild and crazy things in improv because that's kind of the goal, to push the boundary and to just go with it and see what happens. The yes and principle, and I think that a lot more people would be having a better time if they took something like that yes and principle through their
Super
daily
interesting.
life.
So I've always lived with this concept of a third eye, like the eye that's watching me, like I'm seeing myself through that eye. And I think it's a big part of why I've been successful and why I can be in certain rooms and behave in certain ways. The problem is I can't turn that off. So when I go to the daddy-daughter dance and my daughter wants to dance, it's a real effort for me not to see my, lame dancing self out there with her and have that superimpose on my judgment of myself, right? So I'm very impressed that you can get on an improv stage and sort of turn that off and be so committed to it. I'm a bit envious of
the whole I appreciate that. The whole goal is to make sure that I'm not like dissociating from the family. I noticed like
that.
for my personal journey that in order to cope with a lot of the terrible things that have happened to me, I've had to dissociate and kind of look at myself from that vantage point where I'm not there in it experiencing the terrible things. And
Yeah.
so although it did serve me at one point in time, my fear is that I'm going to use it to be distant from the people that are closest to me. And that's like something that's really, really challenging. So being able to find a couple of moments, throughout the week where I know that I'm definitely there and in it and nothing else in the world exists. I'm trying to get more of that myself. So I'm with you right
Awesome.
there.
Yeah. Awesome. Really good.
I did want to talk more about what we talked about, previously months ago now. You talked about parenting struggles. And I know Carol and I have ended up getting onto this topic multiple times. I've got a grown daughter out of the house, and I still got one that's in high school. He's starting up tennis, trying to do something with that. He's trying to win a little prize right now. He's going through like fundraising, trying to get something.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see something that is a little bit outside what he's normally done, but he's really trying to grab hold of that new thing and actually do something with it. It's interesting to see.
Yeah. I have a 13, an 11, and 4-month old. So
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
either,
Hold up. 4-month-old.
yeah, I either can be trusted to give parenting judgment or not trusted at all. I'll leave it to you to figure that out.
The listeners are going to have to
But
determine that for themselves, right?
Here's the
Yeah.
disclaimer. Choose wisely at this point,
choose
right?
wisely. My grandfather, right when we told him that we were pregnant and having this last baby, he said, "Boy, don't you know what causes that?" And it turns out that I do. But we really enjoyed it. And when I was not a parent, that's when you're the biggest expert on being a parent. When you're not a parent, I thought, these kids come into the world, they're blank slates. You just give them what they need to know in life, and then not at all.
Not even close.
No, they are already who they are going to be unless you screw it up for them.
Oh,
right?
it is our God-given right to screw that up.
So much the case. But when I realized that and really got sort of zen with that, because I'm a super controller, when I got zen with that and said, hey, it isn't my job to manufacture this kid who becomes an adult. My job is to keep them out of the ditches, right?
Yep.
Don't let them eat poison stuff,
Keep them safe.
too much of it, and just encourage
Not
them
enough to
be
kill
who
them.
they're right. Encourage them to be who they're going to be.
Yes.
And I have to say, those kids are not who I would have chosen for them to be, but it is still beautiful. I mean, I admire both of my older kids for sure, the choices that they make and the poise that they bring to situations that I never had and don't have now, watching that
But they weren't
has been
supposed to
really
be their
good.
duplicates, if
I-
anything, right?
So my son looks just like me, and my daughter looks just like my wife. And I cringe when people say, "Oh, that's your mini me." And I have adopted the habit now of saying, actually, we don't believe in that. We believe that my son is his own man and is gonna. And people are like, "Okay, nerd. Of course I knew that. I'm just saying he looks like you." But I don't want them to take that identity into themselves.
Well,
And
because
that
they
is
hear it.
they hear it and they become it.
Yes,
Yeah,
100%.
and that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody's shoulders, and that's
Right.
not what we want to do. So my great mentor was a guy named Ron Willingham. Ron wrote 12 or 13 New York Times bestsellers. He and I co-authored a book right before his death called Authenticity, which was about how do you be authentic in a sales environment, which is often a troublesome thing to do. Ron had a core philosophy, and the philosophy went something like this. I'm created in 3 dimensions: an intellectual dimension, an emotional dimension, and an identity-based dimension. I think, I feel, I am. And when I really sunk my teeth into what his philosophy was, I said, I'm going to adopt that. I'm going to live that in my life. And one of the things that we do in management of people and in parenting of our children is we manage and parent at that I am level, right? How to increase your view of who you are so that you can go to do way more things than you would probably think you were possible. Intellectually, I can teach you a few things along the way, right? As somebody that works for me, I can teach, do this code or do this thing or something of that nature, but not a lot. Emotionally, I can't coach you to feel any way that you're not predisposed to feel and the way that you manage your emotions. But if I parent or manage you at the level that you hold as an identity, that's a life-changing thing that will affect you for years to come. So we were talking about gifting earlier. I don't give gift cards. I give kids swimming lessons because they're swimmers then for the rest of their lives, right? Or I give them things that can transform them in that way to be more of the person that they were already going to be. And that's been one of the great secrets, if you want to call it a secret, of our management and the way that we parent our kids.
I really like that.
Yeah, it's all encompassing when it's comes from a very spiritual level, because it encompasses all of those things. And I think what people don't, they separate the spirituality, but really spirituality is the wholeness of it all.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And so what Ron would say is that true integrity is so integrity is the Latin, it's an English word derived from the Latin word for whole. And it's the only English noun that I can find that doesn't have an adjective, right? You can't be integritus or so. You can't have a little bit of integrity. It doesn't work that way. And his point was people that live with integrity think, feel, and believe all in alignment.
100%. I think the word integrity is so overused, and I don't think people really truly understand it, and they misuse it all the time. And it drives me effing insane. Like absolutely insane, because I know a lot of the people that use that word do not walk in integrity, and it upsets me that they abuse that word.
Yeah.
Well, they use it as a weapon, right? To beat other people.
To make an impression. But that impression is a false impression. And it drives me insane because of that.
Do you know I've only ever fired people for integrity breaches? I don't fire them for lack of production. I don't fire them for lack of effort. I fire them for lack of integrity, which usually just simmers down to
all of it.
They told a lie, right? They just told a lie when there was no lie called for. Yeah.
But if that's their nature, you can't change their nature. And that's huge, My boyfriend has a thing that, we talk about all the time, and we hold people accountable to it, right? When you meet somebody, you don't know how they're going to be, how you're going to be able to interact with them. So you test them, right? And I don't mean testing them as being sly. I mean, you try to figure out what kind of individual they are. And he always says, number one, you test them for accountability.
Yeah.
When they say something, are they going to be accountable for it, or are they just blowing smoke up your ass?
Yeah.
Right. Number two comes competency. If I can talk today, competency. Then it comes down to, are they competent at what they do? Can they actually do what they say? They can't. Well, you know what? That's only 2 out of 3. And the third one is, do they walk in integrity?
Integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
And those 3 things are how you test people. They cannot be just 1 or 2. They must be all 3 to be able to have that relationship with you.
So when we interview people, we put them through a 4-stage interview. The first one is a cultural interview, right? So I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to, because you don't know what the culture of my business is. So I'm going to tell you what it is. I don't want to hear much from you. I don't want to hear you, oh, yes, I love that, or I want that, or that. And so like 85% of that first interview, I talk. I tell them in advance. And then I send them away with 4 questions to answer for themselves, not to answer for me. Like, you know, when we go to a job interview, we're supposed to get the job. I know what's going to come back. Like, don't answer it for me. Go answer it for yourself. So that's the first thing that we talk about before we talk about the job. The next interview is the job. It's the competency portion of it. So we talk about, look, this is the job. This is what it requires and that sort of thing. The third interview, we talk comp. So the people that are showing up the first day say, how much does this pay? I'm ready to get started. They don't find a place in any of my organizations. And the fourth interview is the commitment. So the 4 questions, and I coach this in different businesses, but for us, I had this brainstorm one time where I said, all the people that don't work here anymore, why don't they work here? Because again, I don't fire people very often, but people will quit and they'll leave an organization. They all leave for cultural reasons. There's this old chestnut of people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. No, they don't. They leave culture of expectation, right? So if you're expected to do something in a culture and you don't like it, whether it be excellent or crappy, that's why you leave. You take yourself out of that situation, sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously. So the 4 questions that we talk about, which would be different with each organization, right, is I literally sit down and I tell you the rule. I tell you the story that proves the rule, and then I ask you the question. So I'll give you those really quickly. We are a family-based organization, right? My name is on the door. My kid's name is on the door. So we're not going to fool around in this organization with doing stupid things that would embarrass my kid at school if somebody heard his last name, right? So that's one of the things. It also means that we treat each other like family. And if I can say this without getting choked up too much, we didn't cook a meal for 3 weeks. My team showed up every single day with, here's a cooked meal, or here's Chick-fil-A being delivered to you, or something. For 3 solid weeks, we take care of each other that way. So the question is, you know, and then I tell a story. It's this beautiful, wonderful story. One of our team members had a family member that passed away, his mother, and she had this horrible disease called Pick's disease. And Pick's disease is very akin to Alzheimer's, but it's like, you know, your intelligence, you grow sort of a bell curve. You come up, and then you sort of don't lose intelligence over time. Well, with Pick's disease, a total bell curve. So you grow up until you're whatever it is, and then you reverse backwards. So you go down the ladder of cognitive ability until you pass away sucking your thumb. And you're a teenager again and all of that. So I was out of town working, and I heard that his mother had passed away. And so I said to the office manager, like, okay, you know, cancel all of my appointments. I'm headed to Orlando to be with the family. And, you know, put a thing out on the intranet and let people know that his mother passed away and that we're going to send flowers. And she did all of that, and she put the funeral is going to be this day. So I go down, I'm with the family the whole time. We go to lunch, and they're a Catholic family. Go to this gorgeous Catholic cathedral there in Orlando. And the priest gets up, and, you know, he invites my colleague to stand up and and deliver the eulogy. And he stands up and he looks over the audience and he gets choked up and he can't do it. So he steps off to the side, and the priest, I'm not Catholic, but the priest does priestly things for a minute. He catches his breath and he stands up and he delivers this eulogy that I can't talk about without choking up, but basically says most men only know their parents as adults, but I was able to know my mom as a child. So touching. And then he sits down next to me and he says, I am so embarrassed. And I said, why are you embarrassed? And he said, because look. And he hooks his finger, his thumb over his shoulder. And before I can turn, I know what I'm going to see. And my entire firm was sitting there in the church, 4.5-hour drive for most people. They had hired a temp. Nobody asked my permission to do any of this. And they were all sitting there because we don't believe that you go through things alone. And they weren't going to have that. Now, my question to you as an interviewee is, would you have been in the church? Mm-hmm. It's okay if you wouldn't have been. Yeah. It's not necessarily a sane proposition that you drop everything and go to some guy's mom's funeral that you never met before. But if you wouldn't have been in the church, you might not be a good cultural fit for us. Yep. And so don't tell me if you would have been in the church. Go back, and while you're talking to yourself tonight about, do you want to continue interviewing with us? Answer that for yourself. So we do that 4 times. We do that on 4 different points in the cultural interview. And it's very powerful.
It's really interesting, Trey, because I feel like the kids that are younger these days, the different generations, much younger, they're not as connected. Even though they're so connected in social media, they're so far removed connection-wise emotionally from other people. And the way I grew up, because of our culture, I'm Taiwanese, right? Everything was about duty and honor to the family. Mm-hmm. And nothing was, you never did anything without considering, are you going to embarrass the family at all? Mm-hmm. The family was the reason you did things. That was the deciding factor for everything. So if you did anything to embarrass the family, my dear God, good knowing you, Yeah. But it was, so I don't understand in this day and age, like even with my kids, my kids are my oldest just turned 27 on the 12th. And it's interesting to me, they don't feel that connection. Like they don't feel like their family name means something, that what they do and how they represent it doesn't mean something. They feel so removed from their family name. And where for us, man, if you screwed up and you pissed off the Lee family, not a good thing, like my family would be on you. And it was not okay. And if you embarrass them, oh my God, would they give you like the guilt trip of a lifetime on why it wasn't appropriate to do what you did.
That's interesting. So we have a belief in the Taylor family that it means something to be a Taylor. Like we share that with the kids. We show them Taylors that act in the way that we like that to be seen. And we show them the ones that don't as well. So I like to think we're doing that. But back to your point on the millennials and the younger folks that are more connected, we had millennials in that church. Now, did they follow other people there? They may have. But I don't know that I can sort of cut them off and say they don't know what they're doing or they don't know how to be connected. Their connections are like very different, though. You're right.
These days, like there isn't that deeper connection anymore. They're seeing, even though they are so connected. This is what I'm getting at is, even though these days, we are so connected in so many ways, and I mean that by in social media, different platforms, whatever you want to call it, we are still very disconnected. And I think that's where I feel like there's a loss of hope for several, because they feel like, oh my God, in this world of, we literally can talk to anybody, anywhere, anytime, right? I feel so alone.
Now that is true. And my very good friend who's a therapist, and she does amazing work with super high performers, has noticed in her practice, she was sharing this with me, that boomers, for for a lack of a better term, but just looking at that boomer generation, had a lot of very good, deep, long-term relationships, right? But they only got news. They didn't have cell phone. They only got news from one place, right? Two places, the newspaper and Walter Cronkite, and that was it, right? That was pretty much the whole gamut. And so their experience of the outside world was very limited. And so they had a rich inside world, inside the circle world. Gen Xers, which is my generation, very much raised to be independent, latchkey. We weren't, but other people in the generation, latchkey kids, fewer deep relationships, but a much more broadcast-based generation. And then millennials and below may have 1 to 2 very deep committed relationships over a long period of time, but thousands of very thin relationships, just an inch deep. And a lot of the trauma for that generation comes when one of those people die or move on in their life or any of that sort of thing, because you don't have somebody to fall back on if you only have 1 or 2 or 3 of those. So it's a super interesting sort of phenomenon. And we are noticing especially with my 11-year-old, who's the social sort of butterfly, they don't do anything alone. They're on FaceTime. They do homework on FaceTime. They do everything.
But we need space as individuals in order to grow. We also need to nurture that part of ourselves. And I think when you're too connected, I agree.
The interesting thing, I think there can be too much connection there, but the interesting thing to me is if it doesn't happen in that way, it doesn't happen. Like if your friends don't participate in it, it didn't happen. So that's a real interesting, and again, I have no moral judgment one way or to the other on this. I'm just watching it for my kids and how it's different for them, because it is going to be that way. Yeah, they're not going to put that cell phone down. Yeah. Like they're not going to wake up at 18 and say, I don't need the cell phone anymore. I'm going to go have relationships like my grandparents had. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So I think we're sort of swimming upstream if we want to make that happen. But I just want them to understand that your values transcend 100% the technology that you use to have relationships.
Yeah. I have a Discover card, and my card is a cassette tape. So every time I take it out to use it, the people that are old enough to know what that is like, oh my God, that's hysterical. The other people are like, what is that? I'm like sitting here going, I know how old you are. I know what generation.
Yeah. I mean, you've outed yourself
for your dating life, Carol. Like if they don't know what it is, like you guys.
I don't say anything. I just laugh. I'm like, oh yeah, back in the day, the ones that do remember, I love reminiscing with them. I'm like, do you remember when you had to stick that pencil in and you had to roll it up because that thing would just shred inside your CD player or your cassette player inside your car, and you pull it out and there would just be this big long, tape that you'd be like, mother freaking.
My daughter, my 11-year-old, and I were at Urban Outfitters, the store, because that's where she wants to shop. It's not allowed to wear anything. And she saw an audio tape, like we would know as a tape. Oh. And she said, what is this? And I said, well, that's what mommies and daddies used to listen to music on. She puts it to her head and says, this one's broken. Right? Like that's the divorce right there, that they don't even know what the thing is. And the other day, cleaning out my grandfather's house, we had a bunch of VHS tapes. Oh, and so God. I use the term cassette, tape, and VHS interchangeably. And my son was frustrated and flummoxed by, like, which one are you talking about? Like, well, they're all the same thing. Yeah, and it frustrated him to no end,
So funny. Like, and you know what? They just need to be, you just got to show them so they can see it. It's so funny because my kids would have no idea. I think they came around when it was just all CD, like,
all DVDs and CDs and
so none of that even. You talk about cassette tapes and VHS, they're kind of like, I don't even know.
Right. How far back are we going? We can talk about 8 tracks and Laserdisc. Like, come on.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And Betamax and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Betamax. Exactly. Holy crap. What the heck?
Or, getting penalized for not rewinding a movie.
Oh yeah. Be kind, rewind.
Yeah.
Yep.
Remember that?
It's going
My
to cost you
dad
more
had
to return
a
this because you didn't rewind it.
that's right.
Good
My
night.
dad owned a string of video stores, and it was called Hollywood Movies, and he got purchased in a roll-up that became Hollywood Video. And so the
No
logo for
way.
Hollywood Video was my dad's logo.
Yeah.
And he had, he'll kill me if he ever knew that I was saying this, but he had a separate drawer that your late fees and your rewind fees went into that drawer and didn't get reported to people that would want to know about that. Like that was the pocket money for the family. And it was enough that we lived on basically what came in the late fee and the rewind drawer.
No way. Oh my God.
Yeah. So you want to know, like, why would people be so chintzy and try to charge me for that? Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because baby wants a new pair of shoes. That's why.
That is hilarious. I love talking about some of this stuff. I want to know, Trey, what is something about you that most people just don't know?
I know every rule of hereditary titles in the United Kingdom.
Wait,
I
what?
bought
Really?
myself, yeah, it's the most useless knowledge that you could possibly have. I've always had sort of an obsession with that. And I bought myself as a gift this year for myself, a treat for myself. I can see them right here in my office, a set of volumes, which is the complete peerage. It's everything about it. And I literally thought when I was in college, I could be a peerage lawyer. Is that useless or what? Yeah.
It's okay. Hey, I took 4 years of Latin. It's absolutely useless. Yep.
No,
Dead language.
no, Latin's fabulous. I took Latin. I love it. Fabulous. When you
I'm
travel
not saying
along,
I
you can
didn't
always
love it.
find a priest.
Yeah, I didn't say I didn't love it. I mean, I loved it because it helped me when I was doing pre-med. And it also helps me when I'm learning other languages, because that romance language, right? It helps being
It's the bedrock. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Travis, you'll notice that I didn't mention that I was a pilot because
I mentioned you were a pilot.
Yeah, but within 1 minute of meeting a pilot, make sure that you know that he's a pilot. Yeah, so no one doesn't know that I'm a pilot, or a Psalm for that matter either. Yeah.
Well, I'm kind of interested in the whole sommelier thing. How'd you come about that?
So I moved home to the family's hometown when my dad passed. And I had an entire other life. Like I was getting really good at my career choices, and I had this girl that I didn't love enough, but it was okay. I mean, I was building that other life, and then it was gone. And I was home in a rural part of Georgia where we call home today. And there was nothing for me to do here because I had moved from Atlanta to, 3 hours south of a town of 30,000 people. There was nothing for me to do. A new restaurant opened where the chef had come from Napa, and he had roots here, and he opened a beautiful restaurant. And I would go every day, and I knew a little bit about wine, but I bought a copy of the Wine Bible, and I sat at that bar every single day with him at like 4:30, 5:30 every day. And I read the page on Chardonnay, and we drank Chardonnay. And I read the page on Gruner Veltliner, and we drank that. And so I educated myself in that, and then went to San Francisco for a week, took a course, and then passed the exam. The level 2 exam. So there are 5 levels of the exam, and I'm a level 2.5 because I've taken some of the other classes. But you can call yourself a Psalm if that matters to people if you're a level 2. So
I might have to take you around just so that we can pick the right wines.
Oh, it's so fun. So fun. I love going to Total Wine with friends. And I have a lot of friends that'll say, oh, Trey's in town. Can you meet us at Total Wine and help us, stock the cabinet and that sort of thing. And then gifting, like we keep referring back to, I gift a lot of wine. And it's mostly like, I know enough about what you like to know that you're going to love to try this, and you'll never have had it before.
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
That's very
so
thoughtful.
That's a fun way. And then the only thing that I gift to auctions are wine tastings. And so what I always say is, whatever you spend on the auction, that's what I'm going to spend on the wine. And so I now set a cap on that because I lost out huge one time on that deal. But but people who are into wine should not bid on that. But yeah, we really have a fun time, and we'll meet up and have 10 couples, 12 couples, and we'll go through, like, here are all the noble grapes, and let's have 3 different tastings of Chardonnay so you see the different profiles. And by the end of the night, Uber is just steady picking people up. Yeah.
Good thing they're not driving. So where are you
That's right.
located in Georgia?
So my hometown is Valdosta, Georgia. It's halfway between Orlando and Atlanta. It's right on the border of Georgia and Florida.
My brother lives in Georgia now. That's why I ask. I'm going to be
Oh, yeah?
visiting
Where does he?
him, so I may just shoot you an email and say, hey, let's meet up.
Yeah, let's have wine.
I would love that.
Yeah, we should do that. And
I
Travis,
don't
I've been
even-
to
I'm a
Oklahoma
bad
City once,
sister.
and
I
it's
don't know
okay
what
if I
city he
don't go
lives
there
in.
again.
Yeah, I was stationed in the Navy here for the better part of 20 years, and I retired last year and stayed. I haven't found a part of the country calling me or any other part of the world calling me yet. So my son's in high school, and we don't plan to move until that's all said and done. But although I can understand why you wouldn't pick Oklahoma City to come back to, it's super cheap. Housing is available, and people are relatively nice. And why the heck not?
Yeah, it seems to be a good place for other people. It just didn't get into my blood.
Yeah, I can't blame you again. I'm
Is
originally from
that
northern
overly
Minnesota.
insulting? It might be insulting.
Yeah.
It was a backhanded.
People decide how they're going to feel regardless of the intent.
Right.
Like, I grew up in northern Minnesota, and I grew up around, there was 1,000 lakes in my county, and I didn't realize what a rare thing that was until I left. And I'm like, are we going to the lake this weekend? Like, what's up? It's like, yeah, what lake? There's no lakes. Like, I'm in Oklahoma, all the lakes, I think but 2 are man-made. Like, they had to be crafted.
Oh.
And yeah. And then the clay is high, and the dirt here. Clay makes all the lakes red. And I'm from the most crystal clear blue lakes. And so, like, yeah, we're all going to go down to Lake Thunderbird and all this, that. And I get down there and I'm like, I'm not going in that. Like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I cannot go into that water. And they're like, oh, it's not so bad. I'm like, it is that bad, and I'm not okay with it. And so my lake time is drastically decreased over the years that I've been here, because I'm like, I'm not driving 3 hours to a good lake. When I'm back home, there are 5 minutes in any direction you pick.
That is true. Yeah, the lakes in Minnesota are beautiful, and they're like crystal clear and clean, and yeah. Georgia has no man-made. No natural lakes at all. All of our lakes are. Yeah, it's true.
Right? Yeah. All the beautiful nature is like, I come to Victoria and I love to hike because it's so absolutely gorgeous. Now, it's pretty close to Washington. Yeah. We're called the Evergreen State for a reason. Yeah, it rains a lot, but that means also we get beautiful, nature, right? Mm-hmm. We get to sit there and immerse ourselves in it. So I love that we're actually this close together, but there is a different element, I think, up here that I don't get to see when I'm in Washington. They've left a lot of it untouched. So when we get to go on these hikes and you see the falls and everything, it's unlike anything I've ever experienced. It's just so beautiful. You just can't articulate.
So beautiful. I went to the San Juan Islands one time, and I cannot believe that place exists and everybody doesn't know about it. It is so, maybe I shouldn't say. I usually get shushed by people in Seattle, like if I mention it. So like, don't tell anybody. But oh my God, like local beer, crab being pulled out of the harbor, like whales going by. I mean, unbelievable. Yeah, really fabulous.
We're pretty blessed up here, to be honest. So
I like how she's claiming it like she's.
It's not mine. It's Mother Nature's. I do not claim Mother Nature's. Yeah, that's all her. And then, okay, pilot.
Well, we live in a swamp.
What?
We live in a swamp where we are. Yes, that's what is down here. And we are 40 feet above sea level, and it's swampy and humid and buggy and all of that. And it takes some getting used to. But now when I go to Vegas or Phoenix or any desert climate, I just get dry it out like beef jerky
dry.
immediately.
Like a
And I'm like,
yeah.
give me
Yeah.
humidity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Okay. So now
When
we
I
have
go
to
to Denver, I
tackle the
always
whole
say,
pilot thing.
oh, yeah. Yeah. Piloting is good.
Okay. That's all we got. Piloting is good.
Sorry. No. I thought Travis had a question. Sorry. Okay.
Well, a pilot,
So
a guy
pandemic
that does
hits.
CrossFit, and a vegan going to bar, which one tells you about their thing first? That's the question.
Right. Well, I'm obviously not vegan or CrossFit, so you know where I would come in. But you're exactly right, because that's always the way. So when the pandemic hit, like when it became apparent to me, like we weren't leaving the house, I said to myself, there's two things I've always wanted to do. One was write a book, and one was become a pilot. And I travel a whole lot for business. And so I said, well, I don't enjoy this pandemic style traveling where you wrap yourself in bubble wrap and don't breathe on anybody and that sort of thing. So maybe I'll do the pilot thing. But I felt like the moral impetus was to give back before claiming something. So I said, okay, I'll write the book first, and then I'll finish and then I'll immediately go right into becoming a pilot. Well, I didn't know how long that would take. So I wrote the book first. That took a good bit of time, and it really was akin to sort of intellectually giving birth to something. And just because you know it doesn't mean you can write it. And that was really a challenge. So the book came out, and it continues to amaze that it does so well. But then I immediately shifted into, okay, let's do this piloting thing. And so we were flying at the height of the pandemic, which everybody else was too. So the prices were up, and you couldn't get a flight, and your instructor was so booked and all of that sort of thing. But so I would just drive to Atlanta like 3 days a week for months and just hammer it out. And so I started like the end of June of 2021, and March of 2022, I got my license and then bought my plane immediately after that.
Congratulations.
Yeah, and have been flying around and think it's wonderful. And I'm still training and doing other licensing
You and
things.
Ollie need to talk, because
Yeah.
I live, so I have a hangar. So my house, I know, right? I have a hangar, I don't have a plane. But we live on a private airfield. And
wonderful.
it's a private airfield that gets used for emergency purposes. Everybody in our neighborhood originally were pilots, and they wanted to build a community where pilots could be together. And now they've all kind of gotten older. Several of them have stopped piloting because of obvious health reasons. We have one that still maintains his pilot license. He's also an instructor. And my boyfriend wants to make good use of the hangar and the air.
Yeah.
So hey, if you ever feel like coming over, you can land, and you could taxi over to the hangar and put your airplane up. But it's kind of funny now that you mention this, because he's been talking about getting an airplane. So I have a feeling when we go to see my brother in Georgia and we meet up, I think I might need to get to know your wife really well so that we can exit when you guys start talking about planes. Because I have a feeling it's going to go there.
Well, we'll just go up and fly. Yeah, we'll just go up and fly. So my high school girlfriend's dad was a pilot, and they, while we were dating, they built a house and moved into a fly-in community outside of Atlanta as well. And so I know that those things exist and that sort of thing. When I went to law school, I couldn't stand law students. I do not like being in conversation with a lot of pilots either.
Oh, really?
Because the things that make you a good pilot do not make you a good conversationalist. And so, because we can only talk. You can only talk about that stuff. Yeah. So,
funny.
But I didn't get into it because I wanted to enjoy it or to get a new hobby at all. I got into it because I wanted to go from point A to point B, quicker and better. But now I just need to get up sometimes and clear my head, and it's a really wonderful, very expensive way to do that. But it's really good.
It's not cheap. What was the hardest part of flight school for you? When I was going through flight school for the Navy, like my hardest part was like instrument sims. Those things kicked my ass.
Yeah. So two things. One, I pilot an advanced machine that doesn't even have a compass in it. And fully 60% of the testing that the FAA requires is done on stuff that I don't know or look at or ever have cause to use. And it's really antiquated, and they should get a lot better at that. So that was one thing that was really hard. And then I was terrible at landings. It took forever for me to figure out landings. And that's an important part of the journey.
That's probably the most important part.
Take off pretty easy. Yeah.
If you ever want to get to your destination,
really
landings are important.
Well, you're going to land regardless.
Yes, exactly.
You will land.
Yeah.
Whether or not you survive is another thing. I just remember doing the solo.
Totally the case.
When I did my solo flights, it's a lot of people don't know it's like right after 10 hours, like right at 13 hours, I was doing my solo. I was like, I didn't feel like I knew anything. Right. And then you're in the plane by yourself talking to the guys on the ground, and you're going through this checklist stuff. And I was terrified. And I just kept adding like motherfucker to every checklist item, like motherfucking calling on the radio, motherfucking putting up the flaps, like the whole thing, the whole time, completely terrified.
Did everybody get frozen?
I don't know. I think he might have.
Terrifying. It really is. And I'll say it this way, I'm not a great pilot from that standpoint, from the visual standpoint and the intuitive nature, and without sounding sort of, not trying to sound arrogant, I guess I should say. Like, I don't do a lot of things that I can't get a grasp on really quickly and do well at, but I didn't grasp it and do well at it right off the bat. I really had to work laxing into being able to do the job. A very different skill set. I've learned a ton. I have this whole presentation that I want to do on like what pilots now know about business, because there's so many good crossover analogies and things like that. But yeah, it just was not something that came natural to me. And my instructors do that, and they were really kind, but also had the integrity to tell me, you have to work harder at this than other people do.
Yes.
And
don't give up, but you'll have to work
That made
hard.
A lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It wasn't how I wanted it to be. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And now I'm a functionally competent pilot, but I'm still not great, And so I'm studying instrument certification now and that sort of thing. And I'm a much better instrument pilot than I am sort of visual pilot.
That's good that you have that skill to fall back on. As we're getting ready to wrap things up here, I got two kind of final questions for you. One is, where's the one place you want people to get a hold of you at? And then the second one, if there's people that are struggling in whatever they're trying to do right now, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Yeah, you can find me a couple places. I'm on LinkedIn, of course, but my personal site is trey-taylor.com. My consulting site is trinity-blue.com. I think we have a Threadneedle website up for investment opportunities for the family office. And I answer emails as well. So trey@trinity-blue.com. And I love sort of weighing in and helping people and advising and that sort of stuff, whether it turns into a consulting engagement or not. Sometimes it's just a question or two that people need just a different perspective on. So there's that. I'll tell you, I don't know that I have blanket advice for somebody, but I'll tell you what I did last year that changed a lot of stuff in my life. And I had heard this for years. I think I had heard it from Tim Ferriss. I had heard it from other sources. And then I put my own sort of spin on it. But everything in life, you get to a point that everything in life needs to be either a hell yes or a hell no. And I have a pad on my desk. And as people are sort of pitching me opportunities or saying, let's do this or that, that's the standard that I'm having now, because my time is so rationed as it is. If I'm going to donate any of it to something else, I need to make sure that it's a hell yes or a hell no. And then my very good friend and neighbor, who is a horse guy and very country in his ways, said everything is a yeehaw or a hell no. And I think he's completely right about that. So I've adopted that now for over a year, and the quality of my decisions and the way I spend my minutes has been greatly upgraded because of that. So maybe if the listeners, you've heard it 100 times, I know, but at some point it will click to you when you want to value your time properly, and you will really be excited by what you're doing in the course of a day if everything you do is a hell yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And thank you so much for sharing those links from Carol and myself. Thank you so much for being our guest today, Trey. We were happy that we could get you on and provide you a little bit of distraction or a break from all the heavy lifting you're doing for the family night right now. And it's really great to get to speak to you again.
Well, this might be the funnest podcast conversation I've ever had. So I really appreciate you guys pulling me out of the depths right now and just giving me a little bit of free form, good conversation, and really fascinating to meet you and get to know you guys as well.
Yeah, that's the whole goal of this thing, is that we really do care about you and the stuff that interests you, which you're not the only guest to say, like, this is the best time they've had on a podcast. It's not like diving into some abstract business concept and, let's try to figure out how we get to squeeze the most value out of you. We really care about our guests, and we want you to be able to share the real you to the audience, and that's what really matters to us.
Yep.
Well, that shows, and I feel very sort of validated on that. So I appreciate you both for that.
That's all for this episode of Titan Evolution Podcast. We hope this no-holds-barred conversation opened your eyes on what it takes to live a genuinely happy life according to your own terms. Now that you've treated yourself to such a refreshing discussion, you cannot listen to nonsense content anymore. Be sure not to miss an episode by subscribing to the show at TitanEvolutionPodcast.com. Don't forget to share the word so more people can be enlightened, informed, and entertained. Thank you for listening.